Days are cooler, nights are warmer, and I put the blame on you. Time moves slow, but my heart beats faster. When these eyes are looking right at you, right at you. You give me something to believe in, just what I needed. You're the closest.
It is Wellness Wednesday. Women's reproductive health is in the news, it seems like every day, as we look at the rights being infringed state to state to state, federally as well. And, we're going to always have this conversation. So, fellas, you have women in your lives, listen up, okay? I'm going to put out the number if you have questions. We don't talk enough about it. So I'm so grateful to have this woman in today. Dr. Sharon Malone is here. She's the author of Grown Woman Talk, Your Guide to Getting and Staying Healthy. Let me welcome to the show for the first time, Dr. Sharon Malone. Hi.
Hi, Karen. Thank you so much for having me.
Listen, first of all, the book is fire. So thank you for doing it. Thank you for doing it. I have so many questions. I'm just going to jump right in.
Okay.
You OBGYN in the DMV for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
When did you personally start talking about menopause, perimenopause? When did it become real?
You know what? I found an article that was written that I was quoted in extensively about perimenopause and menopause, and it was from 22 years ago. So when I tell you that this has been top of mind for me for a very long time, I just want you to know I have the receipts, and just about everything that I said 22 years ago is the same thing I'm saying about it now. But it's been hard to break to break out of the noise because there's a lot of misconceptions out there about menopause, and particularly communities of color are not getting this message. And that's what I wanted to do.
Well, there's a notion that, once you enter this period of time is when your body is breaking down and slowing down and you're preparing yourself for death. So I think people run away from talking about menopause because to acknowledge it is also to acknowledge that you're on the other side of things. You're no longer virile or sexy or, all the things that, we rely on, some of us as women.
You know what? And I'm here to change that narrative because, you know what? I think of menopause in this time of life as sort of a time of renewed vigor. And that is provided you're in good enough health to be able to get to that point. And so that was really the purpose of the book, to really sort of explain to young women that is never too early to start thinking about this phase of life, and don't really come into this with a sense of dread. I think this is something we should be looking forward to. And the only reason why we dread it is because we don't have enough information from our elders to think otherwise about it.
So you save money on tampons and pads for sure. You're not worried about getting pregnant, although we're seeing an uptick in sexual activity and STDs in the over 50 places that people live because they can't get pregnant, but y'all can get other things. So let's knock it off, still be protected. What are some misconceptions that we had that you've kind of dispelled for us in this book?
You know what? I think the biggest misconception is that particularly when it comes to aging, and unfortunately, the reason why they tend to, the two things get conflated is they happen together. We happen to go through menopause as we get older. And I think that there is this attitude amongst women that suffering is really part of our existence. We have lived a life as women suffering through things. We suffer with cramps, we suffer with migraines, we suffer through bad relationships. And so when we get to menopause, we expect that that's just the latest in the continuum of suffering that's part of womanhood. And I'm saying, no, Suffering should not be part of this part of aging. And you have way more control over this narrative than you think you do if you only knew what to expect and what to do to avoid it. And this is something that I think is particularly problematic when it comes for Black women, is that we don't complain enough about our suffering. And if you don't complain about it to the people who can do something about it, then guess what? You continue to suffer. And I want that to not ever be your resting space. I want you to have expectations that as you grow older, you will get better and you'll get wiser. And, I'm here to say I'm 65 years old and I own that. I am not trying to walk away from that. I'm happy to be here. But I tell you this too, Karen, I have never been wiser. I've never felt better. I have never gotten to a point in life where my priority can be me. You know how it is when we're coming up, you've got something. It's your kids, it's your partner, it's your parents. And then you finally get to this point in life where you just get to say, we all know that point at which as we watch women get older, we say, okay, now she's just stopped caring about what people have to say about her. Learn to say no. All of that freedom comes with this time of menopause.
Well, mine came in my 30s, so I just want to just put that out. I haven't cared
You
for a
are
long
ahead of
time.
the curve.
Yeah, I have not cared for a long time. Dr. Sharon Malone is here. I saw you on CBS Sunday Morning, which is my Sunday ritual. I make me a cup of matcha and I sit down and I watch Good Morning, I'm Jane Pauley, and I'm in, and I saw you on here. I was like, a Black woman's on CBS Sunday Morning talking about menopause. You better come on through. Smiz, let's get on the show. So I'm so happy. And as I'm going through your book, it feels like your chapters are music titles, the songs. And I said, she did like a songs in the key of life for our bodies. Walk us through Solid. Solid is the first one.
Solid
Why
is the
why did
first
you
step.
pick these song titles for each chapter?
Well, you know what? I have to tell you, I was telling someone, I said, look, I'm only going to write one book. So I took everything that I like and I care about it, and it's all in the book. My family, I'm a music head. I love it. And so everything in my life is really sort of punctuated by music. I have a song for everything. So it just made sense as I was writing this book. I was like, you know what? Every time I get to something that reminds me of a song, I'm going to put that in the book. So not only are the chapters the titles of songs, but interspersed throughout the text, there's a little musical note. And so this may be the only medical book out there that actually has a playlist at the end that you could go to and listen to a little bit of my music.
I love it. I love it. All right. Parents from Alabama, right?
Mhm.
You grew up, yeah, they did not go to college. I think neither one of them graduated high school.
Right.
You're one of eight, the youngest by 7 years. So you have siblings that could, have been probably your parents or something. Like, that's crazy. Talk about that.
You know what, it's very crazy because if as I said, I'm 65 years old. My oldest brother is 88. So my parents, now when you start doing this math, you go, this is really, there are not many families like this, mercifully so today. But my dad was 21 years older than my mother. So imagine this. My mother was born in 1914. My dad was born in 1893. So just within one generation of my family, we have the entire sort of experience of, how Black people have accessed medical care in the South through just post-slavery to through Jim Crow to currently. And the point that I make about telling family stories is this, that how we were raised heavily influences what our relationship is with accessing medical care. What do we even know to access? All of those behaviors sometimes will get in the way of our own best health. Because, when my mother and father, they grew up what we call up the country. Okay, in Alabama. And there are those who would argue that all of Alabama is up the country, but no, actually, we have a couple of cities. But they grew up, there were no doctors. There were no hospitals. So how they had to manage, you had to have a lot of mother wit and common sense and elders and people to look to because you had no doctors. And the few doctors that were there, well, let's just say, were not very, those interactions were not positive, to put it that way. And my parents raised us that way. So we didn't grow up at all with any sense of prevention or any sense of seeing a doctor on any other basis other than an urgent basis. You know, you went to the doctor when you were sick. You didn't go to the doctor when you were well. That was ridiculous in my mother's mind. So that kind of behavior that gets transmitted from generation to generation is important. And I think we at least have to acknowledge that, because you have to look at what is getting in the way of my getting good care. And sometimes it's just, knowing when and where to access medical care.
So how does Sharon Malone become a doctor, being raised in a house with a parent that was born in the 1800s,
Yeah.
with there not being doctors? You didn't go to the dentist just for checkups. You didn't get your teeth cleaned every 6 months. I was thinking, there's this young man that they were teasing him online because his tongue is white, and they were like, "You need a tongue scraper." I was like, "Who grew up with a tongue scraper?" Anyway, but walk us through that, because that has to be a journey.
It's, it's funny that you say that about dentists. Dentists, in my growing up, you went to the dentist because they were pulling teeth. Nobody was going. That's why. And you think about, as I'm going to say to everybody, think about your grandparents. How many of them got to be 60, 70 years old and even had teeth? You would just pull teeth, and then you get some dentures, and that would be that. And that's the end of it. And if that's your expectation of things, and not knowing that prevention and all of this has to be done, and that you can die with teeth in your mouth, that was not something that people thought about in my parents' generation. But, to answer your question, I don't really know how getting to be a doctor really got in my head. I think it was because I tease sometimes. I said maybe it was the process of osmosis. I literally lived next door to two hospitals. There was a TB hospital that was right the next block to my house.
Wow.
And then the Mobile City Hospital was the next block up. So, think about that. Who grows up next to a TB hospital? And why would a TB hospital be in the middle of a neighborhood? Well, we know why, but that was sort of maybe by osmosis. But when you grow up in the South and you get labeled, you can get labeled as not so smart or a problem, or you're smart. And I had the good fortune of always being the smart girl in class. And so the highest thing that I could imagine to be, if you were smart, was a doctor. So that's sort of how that got started.
So gynecology, gynecology obstetrician, you are OBGYN, 30 plus years. That particular area was important for you to enter. Why?
Because I really care about women's health. And I tell you, you have to, one of the things that you find out when you're in medical school, you have to find out, what is your temperament? What are you drawn to? Are you a problem-solving person? Are you a fix it and let's be done with it and never see you again kind of person? Because that will determine where you go. And I think that I got to OBGYN, and, again, these little things. I was born at home. I was born at home before that was a thing. But my mother, of the 8 kids, only 2 of the 8 were ever born in hospitals. So this notion about being close to women, taking care of women, because that's who delivered us, midwives, was also, I think, somewhere stuck in my consciousness. But I also grew up in the company of women. I am the youngest of 5 girls. So my whole experience has been, my brothers were much older, but I grew up in the company of women. And, and I think having lost my mother at a very early age, I was only 12 when my mother died, I thought about that a lot. I thought about, care. How can I take care of women? How can I do some of the things to make sure that women don't have the same fate as my mother? And I think my mother died from not just from her cancer. obviously, but she died from not knowing what the signs of cancer were. She died from not even knowing the, as I said, in her generation, not even knowing how to access care or when, or even the possibility that cancer was something that you didn't have to die from. So it was all of those things. So, that's a long way around the block to answer that question, but always taking care of women was very important to me. And that's probably why I was drawn to OBGYN. And plus it's fun. It's the only time you go to the hospital where you could potentially be happier when you left. You come in for a happy occasion, not for a sad one.
How many babies? Do you keep count? Did you
Oh
keep
my
count?
goodness. I do not know, but hundreds, if not, I would say because I did my residency here at GW as well in the DMV. And so I had all those years of, when I was a resident, plus the years when I was an OBGYN. But I tell you this, it must be a lot because I can't go anywhere and not run into somebody who says, oh my goodness, you delivered my baby. Or, I see these young adults now and I just feel so proud and so happy that I was there for a good point in someone's life.
I love it. Dr. Sharon Malone is here. Her book is Grown Woman Talk. Chapter 5, I wanted to focus in, and then we're going to take some callers. The number here is 866-801-8255. It's called Control. I like it because it's Janet Jackson, fellatorian. And it's chronic stress, weight gain, and diabetes. Tame your triple threat. Give us some action items here because as we do fall into perimenopause and menopause, the weight is harder to come off. It gathers in areas that tend to, have a deleterious effect on our health. Stress is something I don't even know. I don't even acknowledge it, if I'm being honest. I don't ever acknowledge stress, but I know it's there because it shows up in certain kind of ways. I know I'm like, oh, I must be stressed, even though I think, conditioned ourselves not to acknowledge it. Give us some tips on what we can do to fight some of this.
Well, let me tell you. So it's all starts to show up right around the time of perimenopause, menopause. And for those listeners who don't know what perimenopause is, those are the years leading up to your last menstrual period. And for Black women, it tends to happen earlier. You have your last period on average about a year earlier than white women do in this country. The symptoms that you have, hot flashes, mood swings, sleeplessness, weight gain, all of that stuff can happen as early as 10 years before you've had your last menstrual period. So it happens when you aren't even thinking about menopause. So it's happening for most women in their early 40s, and some of them as early as their late 30s. And
So why is that? Like, so what is actually happening when it's the last eggs are leaving the body? Like, what your lining is like? What is actually physiologically happening?
okay, so let me explain. So from puberty and until you are probably in your mid 30s, that's what we say premenopause. And those are years of sort of your peak fertility in those years, from about, puberty, whenever that is, to your mid 30s. Perimenopause is that period in between your peak menopause, your peak fertility years, and menopause. Happens usually in your late 30s, early 40s. And what happens in that time is that the quality of the ovulation, the hormones that you make, it's not that you're making too little, it's just erratic. Things are starting to go off the rails where you'll make too much one day, too little the next day. And it is these fluctuations in the hormones that really gives women, those symptoms that we associate with menopause. And in those perimenopausal years, that's also a time of decreased fertility. So you've still got eggs. They just aren't functioning quite as well as they did when you were younger. And that's why getting pregnant is also more difficult in the perimenopausal years. But that period of sort of tumult, where everything is up and down and erratic, even when the periods are relatively regular, those hormonal changes are still going on in the background. And that's why women don't think of it, because they go, well, I'm getting my period, but why am I having hot flashes? Or why can't I sleep? Or why am I about to slap somebody at work today? All of those things.
That's connected.
All of that
Wanting to
is
slap people?
connected.
Didn't know that.
All of that is connected. And so when you start to have those hormonal shifts, when I say that, when we talk about that triple threat of what happens when you start in that period, when you're in the perimenopausal window, that's when women start to gain weight. Well, okay, what's happening there? That hormonal shift is causing, you say you have hot flashes. And here's another thing about hot flashes that I want women to really understand. Hot flashes are not benign. Hot flashes are harbingers sometimes of impending heart disease. So let me just say that. If you have hot flashes, you should treat your hot flashes. Because imagine you have hot flashes all day, you have night sweats at night, you can't sleep. Now you're irritable, you've got brain fog the next day, you are not functioning at your peak capacity, you are not likely to exercise because now you're chronically fatigued. You're going to make bad choices. Not only, and maybe you're self-medicating with alcohol. Sometimes you're self-medicating with food because you feel bad. And this is why you can't take one thing out of this equation and look at it and say, oh, if you just stop doing that one thing. So let's say one thing you can do when you're in perimenopause that will affect your long-term health and that weight gain is to treat your hot flashes. Treat your hot flashes, get a good night's sleep. Sleep is so important because can you imagine, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners can, about what chronic fatigue does to you? It's another stressor in your life. It raises the level of cortisol, which again makes you hungrier, which makes you more fatigued. And so all of this is one big cycle. And that's why I want women, as they are making this transition into menopause, to not accept feeling bad as someplace that just comes with the territory. No, there are ways to address this. And I think not enough women look at at hormone therapy, at hormone replacement therapy, that women know that as something that can be used because it does help break that cycle of all that negativity, which ultimately leads to heart disease, high blood pressure, weight gain, strokes, all of these downstream effects. So I'm saying this not to say, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm here to tell you on the front end, do not ignore these warning signs because they can be addressed. And that's how you go on and get to the point where you live your best life, either perimenopausal or beyond.
It sounds like a domino. Dr. Sunyata was on earlier. Dr. Sunyata Amen, who's also in the DMV area, CalabashT.com, and she's a naturopath. But she also went to medical school, and she says, when people come into her shop and they were like, do you have something for a bladder infection? She said, yeah, antibiotics. Go get your antibiotics. And then we come back and deal with it. It's, a lot of us don't want to take medicine. We don't want the treatments. We don't want the we're not taking our high blood pressure medicine. I just had to chastise somebody not taking their medicine and had a stroke recently. And you're like, take your medicine, and then deal with the symptoms, like we have to get right first.
Right. I think there's a reason why we call high blood pressure the silent killer, is because you're fine till you're not, until you've had a stroke or you've had a heart attack or you've had some of these other things. And let me say, and it can be treated and managed. So yes, you can't take your high blood pressure medication every other day. You have to take it every day and get your blood pressure under control. But let me just say this, because before we even start talking about medications, and this is the message that I give in the book, the earlier you intervene, lifestyle matters, food matters, what you eat, how you eat, how much you eat, and the ability to say, I'm going to get up and I'm going to exercise even if I don't feel like it. And I know it's hard. Nobody wants to do it, but that's where I think the importance of community, get a buddy. It's you'll let yourself down, but if you're gonna meet your girlfriend and we're gonna go for a walk or we're gonna do whatever it is, you're much more likely to do it. And these are things that are so basic. When I say get a good night's sleep, treat whatever the reason is why you're not getting a good night's sleep. Sometimes it's hot flashes, sometimes it's sleep apnea. Sometimes it is that chronic stress that is keeping you going and going and going. Sometimes we're on our devices too much. But this is something that, if I had to say, these sound so basic and they sound so simple, but they're oh so important in terms of how you're going to navigate whatever it is, be it menopause, your heart health, your bone health. All of this gets back to the same basics that we're talking about. But do not be afraid to treat symptoms when you have them, because I think that that's, again, one of the misconceptions that keeps women away from accessing care and treatment for their menopausal symptoms, is because we have this misperception that it is going to cause cancer.
Yeah.
Let me say this. Hormone therapy does not cause cancer, does not cause breast cancer. Let me say this. Estrogen does not. And there's a reason why we think that. You didn't make it up, because there was this study that was out 22 years ago that put that out there in the universe. But a lot of that data has been walked back. We have not really adequately explained to women that that was a little bit of an outlier here. And here's something I really want women to understand. That same study that gave women the impression that it was going to give you breast cancer, let me tell you how much, even in that study, the increase in breast cancer was. It was less than 1 case per 1,000 women per year. Less than 1 in 1,000 women who were on hormone therapy had breast cancer who were on hormone therapy. And you know what? That is less than your risk of developing breast cancer than if you drink 2 alcoholic beverages a day, 2 glasses of wine, or two cocktails. It is less than your risk of developing breast cancer if you are overweight. It is less than your risk of developing breast cancer if you don't get a good night's sleep. All of these things will increase your risk more of getting breast cancer. But here's the more important thing, is that even if you take hormones and you get breast cancer, even if that is the case, you're not going to get a worse breast cancer. Your prognosis is no worse than if you hadn't taken hadn't taken the hormone therapy at all. And the long-term benefits of taking hormone therapy, like not getting osteoporosis, like preserving your sexual function, because vaginal dryness, urinary tract infections, painful sex, all of that is due to lack of estrogen. Those things are important. How we age, important. So when you're having that conversation about whether or not hormones make sense for you, the things that we take ourselves out of that conversation for, like, oh, I can't take it because I have a family history of breast cancer. I have 2 sisters who've had breast cancer. I've had 2 aunts who've had breast cancer. None of them were taking hormone therapy at the time they got breast cancer. Your risk of developing breast cancer is what it is. It's not affected positively or negatively by necessarily taking the hormone therapy, except, and here's a very important point, for women who have had hysterectomies. If you've had a hysterectomy and you can take estrogen therapy by itself, you don't have to take the second hormone, which protects your uterus. Guess what they found for women who took estrogen only? They had a 23% decrease in the incidence of breast cancer over 20 years of looking back, and they had a 40% decrease in the risk of dying from breast cancer if they took estrogen only. Who has more hysterectomies than Black women? Nobody. So if you had, so that's why I said I want to take some of that fear factor out of it, because I think that the reason that we don't access care and the reason that women are so afraid, and they are, sort of paying attention to that one little thing that may or may not be a problem, and we are ignoring all the benefits that come from hormone therapy, such as the weight, the weight gain, the sleeplessness, the chronic stress, all of that.
Now, for people who don't want to take it, like me, like
Yes.
but I don't have hot flashes. I'm not,
Right.
I sleep like a baby, so if I'm not having symptoms, is there a need to take the therapy?
Well, here's what I would say to that, Karen. If you're not having symptoms and you're good, then no, I wouldn't tell you to just go take hormones just to be taking hormones. unless you have a serious, if you are at risk for osteoporosis. We know that you already, if that would be a reason why to take hormones, even in women who are asymptomatic. However, even women who don't need what is called systemic hormones, which is the hormones that you take to treat all the symptoms in your body, most women can benefit from using vaginal estrogen. And that is just local topical estrogen that is very low dose. Anybody can take it, because about 85% of women will at some point in their lives, maybe when you're 70, maybe when you're 80, have those experiences with vaginal dryness, irritation, and frequent urinary tract infections.
Yes.
So vaginal estrogen for just about everybody, and systemic hormones for women who are symptomatic. And I can't say that enough. If you've got symptoms, do not think, because here's the other thing. When are they going to stop? I told you they start in that transition period, and they may go on for another 10 years after that. 20 years is a long time to be hot and bothered and
Come
miserable.
on. Well, you have a chapter, Hot in Her, which kind of covers that. The vaginal estrogen, is that over the counter? We
No,
have to get
you
we
need a
need a prescription for that.
You need a prescription for that, but it is very low dose and very well tolerated. And, and it comes in many different forms. You can use a cream, you can use a tablet, you can use a ring, but I would say it should be over the counter. It should be.
Will you take some calls? Dr. Sharon is here. Dr. Sharon Malone. She has a book, Grown Woman Talk, with some grown women and a man online. We're going to go to the phones, 866-801-8255. We're going to head over to Arkansas and welcome in Sylvia. Hi, you're on the Karen Hunter Show.
Good afternoon. So I want to chime in. I had a hysterectomy about 3 years ago, and after the doctor, she said, well, do you want to start on hormones? And I initially said no because of that fear, oh, you'll get the cancer. And let me tell you, I did hot flashes for about a month, and I said I will not. I do not want to wake up soaking wet every night. I also have the dryness. So now I do the patch, and I have the estrogen cream. And in talking with my friends that are my age is something that I think our parents, obviously my mother, I can think back seeing my mother just like pouring sweat out of her, not knowing that it was a hot flash, or you see women carrying fans. And I think for our community, women just think it's something that you have to go through, that it's, obviously it's natural, but, oh, I have to do it. And women are suffering. It is sickening to wake up night sweats and, and have to change your clothes and just feeling irritable. I also dealt with that before knowing, going off on people at work. Your tolerance level does get super low because, like she said, you're not sleeping. So I would implore every woman to just, do a little bit more research, because it's best for you to try something instead of being miserable all the time. So that is my comment.
And I could not agree more, because here's the thing. I'm not here to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do. What I am here to tell you what your options are, and to tell you that suffering does not have to be the inevitable consequence of just getting older in menopause. So I feel quite confident that once women have adequate information, they can make good choices for themselves, and you can do it or not do it. But I don't want you to not do it because of fear or misinformation. And Black women, for whatever reason, are least likely to be prescribed hormones. And even when prescribed, they are less likely to take it when they go home. So it turns out that only about 6 or 7% of Black women who are symptomatic actually get treated for their menopausal symptoms. And I think that's just deplorable.
And a lot of it has to do with the distrust, though. Our medical system has not treated Black women kindly. They've ignored our pain. A lot of doctors, particularly male white doctors, and even medical school is not, they don't train folk to, and then we have the Tuskegee experiment. You got radiation. You have, you have so many markers that will tell you not to trust. And there are very few doctors like you, Dr. Sharon, if we're being honest, who can allay fears, because this is all we needed. You freed so many people today. I'm gonna tell you that right now. I have a chat in Nubia, and Patricia wanted to know, can you ask, can the hormone replacement therapy be effective after menopause?
Yes. And here's the what we know from the same study that we had, the large study, was that to be most effective or to get the most benefit from your hormone, not just the symptomatic relief, but the long-term benefits, it's best if you take it within 10 years of your last period or before age 60. And, and it's either or. You may not have had your last period until you were 55. Well, then in that case, the 10-year rule would apply. But that's when you get the most benefit. So the earlier you start, the more benefit you get from it. But there's never a point at which you say, well, is it too late? And it depends. And that's when the conversation becomes a little bit more nuanced, because it depends at that point. What are your risk factors? It works best when you're trying to prevent things. It doesn't work so well when you're trying to treat them after the fact. You see what I mean?
Got you.
Except when we're talking about vaginal estrogen. And vaginal estrogen, anytime, anywhere, you could be 85. If you want vaginal estrogen, you can have vaginal estrogen.
Because moisture is important.
Moisture
Tyra
is
wants to know, she wants to know your thoughts on bioidentical hormones.
Yeah. Bioidentical hormones are fine. And I think for listeners that don't know what we're talking about is that estrogen comes in many forms, and some of it is bioidentical. And all bioidentical means is that if you drew it on the chalkboard, it would have the same chemical structure as the estrogen your ovaries make. That's all bioidentical is. Now, I think people get bioidentical sometimes confused with compounded bioidentical hormones, which are things that are made in that a lot of doctors will or labs will make little small batch of bespoke hormones. You don't have to have compounded hormones to be bioidentical. They're more they cost less when you get them. You can get bioidenticals from CVS prescribed by your doctor. You don't have to get those small batch $1,000 hormones made especially for you.
Oh, you are so brilliant.
My days are cooler, nights are warmer, and I put the blame on you. Time moves slow, but my heart beats faster. When these eyes are looking right at you, you give me something to believe in, just what I needed. You're the closest.